Hey, you. Thanks for tuning in to the deep dive.
We really appreciate you giving us your time.
Yeah, we know it's valuable, so we're going to jump right in. No fluff today.
Right, we're covering some key things happening right now in trucking.
We've got the driver pay increases everyone's talking about, the whole ELD debate, which, never really goes away,
Then there's Operation Safe Driver Week coming up soon.
and a situation in Wyoming about English language rules, plus a bit of news from Illinois on IRP renewals.
And it might seem like separate stuff, but it all kind of connects, doesn't it?
Exactly. It really paints a picture of life on the road.
We want to show those connections, give you the context.
Like Hervey over at Life, as
Wow.
the trucker says. Try to see all the angles. That's the goal here.
Hopefully connect some dots, maybe have a few aha moments along the way.
All right, let's do it. First up, driver pay.
The big headline, right? Wages up 16% in Q1 2025.
Sounds amazing on the surface. 16%.
It does. And it points to a few things happening. Driver shortages are still a big factor.
Still, feels like we've been hearing that forever.
It's persistent, and turnover rates, they're still really high in some areas. Companies are fighting to keep seats filled.
And freight volumes have been
Okay.
relatively steady.
Yeah, generally steady. So combine that need for drivers with decent fight, companies have to react.
So how are they reacting? What kind of increases are we actually seeing?
It's a mix. You've got hourly pay bumps, those big sign-on bonuses getting headlines.
Always see those advertised?
Right, and per-mile incentives, especially, it seems, for the long-haul OTR drivers and specialized freight haulers.
Okay, so money's going up. But
Yeah.
the real question is, does that 16% actually mean drivers are doing significantly better financially?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Because on paper it looks great, but what's the reality?
We heard from Jason, a company driver in the Midwest. What was his take?
He's felt like it was mostly just catching up, like making up for inflation, eating away at everything else.
Yeah, that makes sense. Cost of living's gone nuts.
And then there was Maria, a team driver from Texas. She had a really interesting point.
What did she say?
She said after you take out all the expenses, food on the road, fuel, maintenance if you're a lease op, all that,
Yeah.
that 16% feels more like maybe 3% in her pocket.
Wow, only 3% actual gain.
Yeah.
That's sobering.
It is. And Terrence, a lease op, he basically just asked, what took so long? Where was this kind of bump when things were really tough a year or two ago?
Good question. These perspectives, they really show that the headline number doesn't tell the whole story, does it?
Not at all. It highlights that pay is just one piece. A big piece, sure, but not the only one.
Because even with more money, if you're dealing with bad dispatches or crazy long hours...
Or just feeling disrespected, not valued. That pay increase might not be enough to keep you there.
Right. Things like respect, maybe more flexible scheduling, actual support for health and well-being, those matter too. A lot.
Definitely. And it's also important to see who is getting these bigger increases.
Yeah, is it across the board?
Doesn't seem like it. The data suggests drivers in flatbed, tanker, specialized stuff like last mile, hazmat, they're seeing more of it.
And the new hires at the mega carriers getting those bonuses.
Exactly. They pull the average up. But if you're a veteran driver at a smaller company, you might not be seeing that same 16% jump at all.
So it really depends on your specific situation.
Very much so. And here's a key point from the analysis. This increase wasn't just generosity.
Oh, what drove it then?
Necessity, basically. Turnover was getting incredibly expensive for companies. Experienced drivers leaving, retiring.
And the cost of training new drivers, plus the higher accident risk with less experience.
Precisely. It reached a tipping point where paying current drivers more became cheaper than constantly dealing with the churn.
Huh. This is a very pragmatic way to look at it.
It is. So for you listening, that pay bump is good news, obviously. But look beyond the number. How does it feel in your wallet after expenses? And are the other parts of the job improving too?
Good advice. Okay, let's shift gears completely. Fireworks.
Yeah, a very niche part of trucking, the American Pyrotechnics Association, the APA.
They're asking for exemptions from FMCSA rules.
Yeah, temporary ones, specifically around their peak season, leading up to the 4th of July.
What kind of exemptions?
Things like some hours of service limits, maybe some flexibility on ELD requirements for shorter monitored trips, and rules around hauling only at night.
Why do they need exemptions?
Well, their argument is that hauling fireworks is unique. It's a very narrow window to move them legally and safely.
Super time sensitive, I bet. Can't just sit on explosives.
Exactly. Just-in-time delivery is crucial. Plus, it's already heavily regulated hazmat protocols, sometimes police escorts.
Right, high security.
And for many drivers doing this, it's purely seasonal work. A few intense weeks a year.
So they're saying the standard rules don't quite fit their short, intense, high-security operation.
Pretty much. It's not like hauling toilet paper year-round.
Did we hear from any drivers who actually haul fireworks?
We did. Chuck from Missouri mentioned how tough it is navigating small-town parade routes sometimes, trying to meet those strict deadlines.
I can imagine. And Shelley, a team driver.
She raised a valid concern. Are we setting a precedent here? If you make exceptions for fireworks, who's next?
That's a fair point on the safety side.
And Marcus, a seasonal driver, he was questioning if the regulatory burden is even worth it for just a few weeks of work.
Interesting angles. What about the FMCSA? What are their likely concerns?
Safety, number one. Easing rules for explosives, even temporarily, raises red flags.
Understandable.
Plus that precedent issue Shelley mentioned. And it could make enforcement trickier.
So how's the wider industry reacting?
It seems kind of mixed. Some smaller fleets that understand niche operations are probably supportive.
But safety groups.
Likely opposed. They tend to push for universal standards, generally.
And most drivers. Are they fired up about this?
Honestly, the info suggests many drivers are probably more worried about things like finding safe parking or detention time, everyday stuff.
Right. So for the listener, this fireworks situation is a good example of that tension, isn't it? Between general rules and specialized needs.
It really is. It makes you ask, can regulations be more adaptable without compromising safety?
Okay, let's move to some potentially good news, maybe a little relief for some folks. Illinois?
Ah, yes, the IRP deadline extension.
Tell us about that. What is IRP, first of all?
It's the International Registration Plan. Basically, if you run commercial trucks in multiple states or Canadian provinces, it lets you register in your home state and pay prorated fees based on mileage in each jurisdiction.
So it simplifies things, avoids registering everywhere.
That's the goal. But the paperwork, oh boy.
Yeah, I hear it can be a nightmare. Getting all the mileage records right, meeting the deadlines.
Exactly. And mistakes or missing that deadline, it can mean your truck gets parked. Serious consequences.
So Illinois extended the deadline?
They did. Pushed it back to April 18th, 2025. Just gives everyone a little more breathing room.
Who did that help the most, would you say?
Probably owner-operators, since they're juggling everything themselves.
Makes sense.
Small fleets, too, maybe with limited office staff. And even new carriers trying to figure out the system for the first time. Avoid those early mistakes.
I bet there were some sighs of relief.
Oh, I'm sure. We saw comments like, phew, needed that. But also folks saying the system itself still needs fixing.
And probably some who will still wait until April 17th anyway.
Huh. Probably true. Human nature.
What about the industry response overall? Dispatchers, admins?
Generally positive, you'd think. Less last-minute panic trying to chase down drivers for paperwork. Maybe eases the load slightly on the DMV processors, too.
But the key message is,
don't get complacent. Use the extra time wisely. Get your paperwork organized now to avoid that last-minute scramble.
good advice.
Hmm?
It's temporary relief, not a permanent fix to the administrative burden.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It highlights those ongoing compliance challenges.
All right, shifting gears again. Something drivers need to have on their radar every summer. Operation Safe Driver Week.
Yep, the CVSA's annual event, coming up in July.
What's the main goal of this week?
It's a coordinated enforcement blitz across the U.S., Canada, and Mexico, focused on reducing unsafe driving by both commercial drivers and passenger car drivers.
And the focus this year is?
Reckless and aggressive driving. So things like speeding, tailgating, distracted driving, big one there, unsafe lane changes, not wearing seatbelts, and even road rage. They're specifically looking for those behaviors.
Why is this week particularly important for truckers to pay attention to?
Well, obviously, getting pulled over and getting a violation isn't good anytime. It can hit your CSA score.
Which affects your job, your insurance.
Right. It can mean time off the road for inspections, delays, lost income. It adds up.
So what should drivers expect out there during that week in July?
Definitely expect increased patrols, marked and unmarked cars, more roadside inspections, and they'll be specifically watching driver behavior, not just checking equipment.
Spot checks, maybe. High traffic zones.
Yeah, expect checks near way stations, busy interchanges, maybe known problem corridors, and remember, it's U.S., Canada, Mexico, so enforcement is up everywhere.
Okay, so what are the top tips for drivers to just sail through it without any issues?
It's the basics, really, but super important during this week. Put the phone away, ditch the distractions,
Absolutely critical.
maintain that safe following distance, give yourself space, wear your seatbelt, even just moving in the yard or sleeper.
Got to buckle up.
Come to a full stop at stop signs, no California rules. And make sure your paperwork's all current and easily accessible. Maybe double check your dash cam is working just in case. And if you do get stopped, stay calm, be professional.
Found advice. What are other drivers saying about it?
We saw some comments. Reggie, an OTR vet, basically said, be smart, guys. It happens every year.
Good reminder. Sandra, a trainer.
She tells your rookies, if you're compliant, you've got nothing to fear. Well, maybe just the DOT inspection itself.
Huh. And Luis, a company driver.
He actually welcomed the focus, especially on distracted driving, wants to see everyone paying more attention.
That's a good perspective, too. It's not necessarily about getting truckers.
No, it's framed as a safety reminder for everyone on the road. A reminder that safety rules matter, and enforcement is active. Being proactive about safety is always the best bet.
Definitely. Okay, one last topic, and this one's generated some heat. Wyoming.
Ah, yes. The push by a lawmaker there for stricter enforcement of English language proficiency rules for commercial drivers.
What's the reasoning behind this push?
The lawmaker cites safety concerns. The idea is that drivers need sufficient English to understand routing changes, road closure information, emergency alerts, things like that.
And this isn't a new rule they're proposing.
Correct. It's about enforcing an existing federal regulation that they feel isn't being consistently applied in the state.
How are truckers reacting? Sounds like it could be divisive.
Very much so. You've got some drivers saying, yeah, it's common sense safety, you need to communicate. But then you have others raising serious concerns about discrimination, especially against immigrant drivers who are crucial to the industry.
Right. Worried about unfair targeting.
And then there are many who kind of see both sides. Maybe they've had communication issues on the road, but they've also seen skilled drivers treated unfairly, perhaps because of language barriers.
Did we hear any specific driver viewpoints on this one?
Yeah, a few interesting ones. Big Mike, an OTR veteran, talked about helping drivers with limited English who are actually really good, safe operators.
So skill isn't always tied to language fluency.
Exactly. Tasha, Elisa, acknowledged the safety point, but suggested focusing on better language training in schools, not just ticketing drivers.
Proactive instead of punitive.
And Raj, a newer driver, he expressed feeling potentially singled out or judged, even though he met all the official requirements to get his CDL.
You could really feel the tension there. What could happen if Wyoming really does crack down on enforcement?
We could see more DOT checks specifically targeting language skills, which could be, controversial on how they're conducted.
Yeah, how do you even test that fairly roadside?
Good question. Driving schools might feel pressure to add more robust language components, and the big worry is that qualified immigrant drivers might feel unwelcome or unfairly targeted.
What about the trucking companies?
The sense is many might hope it just blows over, but if enforcement ramps up, it could create real staffing and operational challenges for them.
This really touches on a sensitive balance, doesn't it? Safety versus fairness and inclusivity.
Absolutely. Especially considering how much the industry relies on drivers from diverse backgrounds, including immigrants.
That's a tough one. Okay, so we've covered a lot today. Pay, fireworks rules, IRP deadlines, safety week, language proficiency.
It really shows how complex the trucking world is. So many interconnected pieces.
And understanding all these different angles, like Hervey suggests, is key to navigating it successfully.
It helps you see the bigger picture, anticipate what might be coming down the road.
And this ties back into that idea of managing your time, doesn't it? Not just for these shippers and receivers.
But for yourself, using that downtime constructively, maybe learning new skills, looking into side hustles.
Like building an online income stream, maybe?
Yeah.
Thinking longer term.
Exactly. When you see challenges like pay maybe not keeping up, or constant regulatory pressures, or enforcement blitzes, it makes sense to think proactively about your future.
Taking control where you can.
Precisely. Building resilience, planning for what's next, whether that's retirement or just having more options.
So for everyone listening, think about how these issues, the pay reality, the regulations, the safety focus, impact you. What steps can you take?
And those resources we mentioned earlier, retirefromtrucking.com, lifeasatrucker.com, they offer ideas on things like online income, retirement planning, connecting with other drivers. Might be worth exploring.
Definitely. So here's the final thought to leave you with as you roll on. With all these moving pieces in the industry, how are you actively shaping your future within it?
Something to mull over.
Give that some thought. Thanks again for joining us for this deep dive. Stay safe out there.